Welcome to the Recovery Toolkit Podcast. I'm Richie. I'm going to be your host. Throughout the series, we're going to talk to a range of different people who will give you tools and tips to help manage your recovery. The podcast itself is being brought to you by Epic Restart Foundation, who are a national charity who support people to rebuild a positive life after gambling harm. So today on the Recovery Toolkit Podcast, I'm joined by Karen Slater. Karen, I've known you for quite a while. Probably not seen you for a few years now, but you were one of the ever-present people in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous when I first got into recovery. So you were definitely a shining light for me back in those days. So it's good to have you on the podcast.
Aww.
And you're on the podcast invited by your daughter, Dion, who now works for us as well. So this is the first time we've done a podcast with the daughter and the mother.
Oh, fabulous.
Non-related. In terms of this is your story, not hers. So why might you be on the podcast, Karen? Tell us a little bit about what got you into recovery.
Tell you a bit about my journey. So it's a generational thing in my family. So I was born into it. I was born into alcoholism. My uncles drank, my nana and granda, both my parents. My earliest memories is just fear, absolute fear. Looking for the next thing that was going to change the way I felt. And at first it was codependency, and I'm really good at body language. I assess body language and I'm looking for danger immediately. And then I used fantasy, and I relied on fantasy very early on in my life. And I would really read back to back, The Princess and the Pea and the Cinderella and the Ladybird books. And what I realized was they have a hard time as well. They have a hard life. And what they do is they kind of just survive it. And eventually someone will come along and fix them. So for me, I held on to that until I became a teenager, and then the fantasy wasn't working anymore, and the codependency wasn't working, and I couldn't control all my environment. And for me, I started finding substances. It was back in the 80s then. I was about 12, and it was the start of my journey into addiction.
Substances? Which ones kind of were in your story?
Evo stick in the, back in the 80s, it was all over the newspaper. And I remember my dad reading the Chronicle, and he's going, this bloody glue sniffing lock. And that was it. The seed was planted. But I remember people at school at the time, they were starting to try like the glue sniffing, and I thought, I just knew then, I thought, I want to try this. And I remember really persuading two of my friends, and I went on and on and on until they came with us. And we went in the back of Kenton shops at the time, and we started with glue sniffing. And for me, from that first inhalation, I was absolutely hooked. I loved immediately what it did for us. It changed how I felt within seconds. And I knew I was going to do it again. And I went and done it again the next day, but I left my friends. I went on my own because I didn't want to share my stuff. And that was the start of using anything and everything I could to change how I feel, and especially take away the fear, or like that low self-esteem that I already had about myself, and that social awkwardness. So for me, I was off and running. And then it kind of led on to gas, when you couldn't get hold of the glue, and they were starting to get really strict at the shops selling it. It was easier to get hold of gas, so I would anything really. People were in school, like sniffing the Tipex and all of that. Me, I didn't want that. I wanted like a C&A's carrier bag glued to my face, stuck to my face. But it was the feeling. I just loved that being part of. I loved that. I recognised straight away why they called it a trip, because I thought it's a holiday. Like my body was the same in the same place, but I went on holiday from feeling for hours, it felt like. And then when I would come out of this hallucination, it had only been like an hour, but I had been off in the distance somewhere else. And I thought, this is why they called it a trip. I immediately loved that. When I was 18, I didn't take really alcohol until I was 18, because I did not want to be like my parents. And every time they were, they were really abusive to us. They were physically abusive. They were mentally abusive. I was beaten up on a regular basis till I was 19 years old. I was spat at. I got the dog set on us. So I had all that trauma stuff in the background as well. Yeah. And I kept saying to them, I will never be like you. I'm never going to rely on alcohol. I knew they were neglecting me. I knew it wasn't right. I knew it was abuse. And to me, it was the alcohol. But when I first took alcohol, the first thing I noticed was that warm, cozy feeling that just warmed up the entire part of my body. And for the first time in my life, it took away the fear. And I also remember I had been so socially awkward. They threw a party for us in the Windsor, Kingston Park for my birthday. And I didn't even know what to drink. And somebody went, have a vodka and Coke. You cannot really taste the vodka in it. I had the vodka and Coke. The first thing I loved was how it looked in my hand. I thought, oh my God, I've made it. Like the princess in the pea, I've made it. I've survived. I've gotten through my childhood. So I loved how it looked and I loved how it made me look. And I thought, I'm an adult now. Everything's going to be different. And then when I took a taste of it, I absolutely adored the taste. But I loved the feeling. It also gave us the social skills that I thought I lacked. And immediately I was socialising with people in the pub, and that was it. I was off and running.
Yeah, and I think there's lots of relatability there. Is we were just trying to escape feelings and emotions.
Absolutely.
And I think I talk to loads of people who've suffered from addiction, all different types, and nine times out of 10, we can get to a point where they were trying to escape. They were trying to escape the reality of what they found themselves in. And that was generally feelings and emotions, and it wasn't always big things. It's not always big traumatic life events, but it's just something that was missing at some point in their life.
Yeah.
And what you've just described there is exactly that, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people can talk about the behavior becoming addictive or the substance becoming addictive or, whatever it is that they choose to use, but actually it's the escape.
Oh,
it's the
absolutely.
escape, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And in your journey, as you obviously move into adulthood, how did that progress?
So it's about maintaining the substance that was filling the hole in the soul. And for me, it was a hole in the soul, whether it be trauma or whether it was like low self-esteem or lack of confidence or social skills, or I thought I was a better person when I drank. I thought I felt more attractive when I drank, just all the things that it initially gave us. The next day it would kind of turn on us. And then I'm left with that fear and anxiety. So I'd needed more. And I needed more. And I kind of spent the rest of my life just trying to fill that hole in the soul with whatever I could. And whatever it was as well, it did fill the hole in the soul for a short time.
Yeah.
And then the emptiness always came back. It was always temporary. And the self-esteem always got lower because the way I used and abused things to change the way I felt, it lessened me inhibitions, which then made us, my moral compass was on the floor. Yeah. So it got to the point where I'm waking up and I don't know where I am and I don't know how I've got there, or I'm waking up with somebody and I don't know who the hell they are, or I've had children and I'm thinking, I've got children, I'm going to fill that hole in the soul now. Finally, I've got these little children that I can love, but the children are really demanding and I can't always console them and they're crying more and I'm taking that really personal. So it's kind of whatever it was, it kind of worked for a little bit and then it didn't work anymore. So I needed the alcohol more, or I needed the man more, or I needed the thing more, or I needed the promotion of the job, or I'm just chasing what I can to make me feel better. And then when I've got it, it's not enough. I need more. And that for me is... by the time I got into recovery with a problem with alcohol, but really I had a problem with alcohol, medication, needing the perfect person to keep us safe and secure, or needing another child. Or I went on and had 4 children, and in my head, with every child, I'm going to be the perfect family. I'm going to be like the Ladybird books. It's finally going to be where I'm okay and life is okay and everything's going to be manageable, and nothing ever was. It all filled us on a temporary basis and just never lasted. So I kind of ended up with a problem of alcohol, drugs, medication, men, children.
It's all external, isn't it? It's all external to
yeah.
yourself. And I think a lot of people we work with seek that external validation. Yeah. And that doesn't even change when you get into recovery either, though. For some people, it's It's I'm chasing clean time, I'm chasing a date, I'm chasing a coin, I'm chasing that external validation that I'm worthy. I'm chasing that external validation that, you know, I have my place in society. I'm chasing that job, that promotion, that peer rise, whatever it is. And they never look in themselves. Not everybody, but I see it a lot in people that, you know, and they become abstinent and they think that's the be all and end all, but they don't really work on themselves and they don't go internal, you know. And when did you get into recovery, Karen?
So I was searching for recovery when Dion was born, really. Dion was born and I thought that would fix it. And that was in 91. But within a few months, I was starting to sneak out to the shop to get another drink. And then I would hate myself for why am I needing to drink when I've got a little baby there that needs us? So it's kind of that escalated. So I kind of started searching. I remember going to, am I allowed to mention the services?
Mm-hmm.
Some of the services.
Of course.
So my first port of call really at the time was the doctors, and then I got referred to Plumber Court.
Mm-hmm.
And at Plumber Court, them days, they'd done like a DIC course, which was like a 2-week intensive course. And it was great. She was a baby then. And they were helping us with childminding. Well, I started seeking recovery. And I found that really hard. So it was kind of 98 really when I came into recovery. Because by then I had 2 children. And I was leaving my children. You know, I had the best intentions every single day to be the best mom I could be. But as soon as I took a drink, everything went out the window. You know, so my children would come back from school and I was kind of off my face. And I hated that. I absolutely hated who I had become. I couldn't mother them. They were mothering me. They had become my carers. And I knew that was wrong in every way. But I didn't know how to not do it either. You know, so I started chasing it in 1998.
And what did it look like when you first started? Obviously, you mentioned Plumber Court, and then obviously I bet that must have led on to trying other things. What was the early days of recovery looking like for you?
So for me, I went to, I tried the nicer, softer options first because being told that I had to be abstinent was absolutely terrifying. So I wanted all the acupuncture first. Give us the acupuncture, give us the aromatherapy, give us the counselling. Yes, if I have counselling, I'm going to be cured. Nothing ever worked because I'm still had the hole in the soul. And then I went to Alcoholics Anonymous for me. And in the early days, I didn't like all the touching. I didn't like all the praying. I thought they're going to come out with tambourines any minute now, and I cannot stand that. However, I was seeing people who were talking about they had lived on the streets or they had lost this or they had lost that. And here they were sober. And wow, I love that. I absolutely love that. So in the early days, I would take my kids to school in the morning and then I would go to, you know, it was a place called the Rossetti, and I always call the Rossetti of like the A&E of Newcastle, the A&E of recovery. You know, there sometimes was ambulances there. You know, people were passing out. There was people withdrawing. Sometimes the police was there, but I absolutely loved it. And I spent every day there for the first 2 years. I was terrified that if I wasn't there, I was going to relapse.
Yeah.
So I did that for like 15 years, really. But the first 2 years, I kind of lived. And I was scared, you know, they say it's a bridge to normal living, but I was absolutely terrified because I thought, if I'm not in a meeting, I'm going to drink or I'm going to use or I'm going to this or I'm going to that.
And I think that's an important thing about recovery meetings, you know, fellowships, mutual aid meetings, whatever it is that you go to, it sometimes just gives you that safe space for that time, doesn't it? Yeah. And I think, you know, I speak to people in that after 3 months, they're like, I want to save the world and I want to, you know, give back. And that's fine. And that's a great thing to strive towards, but really, you've really got to look after yourself, haven't you, in those early days? Yeah. And I think that was the same for me. 18 months for me, Alcoholics Anonymous gave me a safe space. Yeah. And in that an hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever the meeting was, I knew I wasn't going to drink. I knew I wasn't going to use. I didn't have to pretend to be anybody I wasn't. I was just Richie, you know, and actually I learned so much in that time. Same. You know, so much in that time. And people talk about peeling the layers of the onion back. Yeah. And that's never stopped for me, by the way. Yeah. But in them first 18 months especially, that was a massive part of my journey, was doing the steps and also working out who actually was I?
Yeah.
Because at my core, I didn't know. I didn't really know. I'd always put a mask on. I'd always pretended to be somebody to try and fit in, or, you know, to just be part of society. And in there, I didn't have to be anybody other than me. And that's what I loved about that. What else did you get from AA, Karen, in those days?
Do you know what? When I look back at the early days, at first I kept changing my seat because I thought they're going to ask us to read. They're going to ask us to read. I've got no social skills. I can't read. And eventually I couldn't escape it anymore, that I started reading, and I used to stutter and I was terrified. My vocabulary was very limited because I'd come from a place of abuse as well. So, you know, like I wasn't comfortable talking whatsoever. So AA kind of gave us a confidence. It started allowing us to unravel my life as well, and unravel trauma, unravel me, realize what, because of the codependency as well, I liked whatever you liked. And, you know, sitting in AA in the early days, I'm thinking, actually, I don't quite like this. I thought I liked it because you liked it. So I kind of got to know who I was in the early days, and it started building on my confidence. It started building on my social skills outside of that as well, because they would have like a lot of social events that I absolutely loved. It gave us everything. I loved the 12 steps. I still love the 12 steps. I wish the 12 steps were in schools. To me, what I realised early on is it's kind of like that moral compass. So for me, it's a bit like a sat-nav. You know, my 12 steps is my sat-nav. I was terrified to drive anywhere and I couldn't understand maps. But once I had a sat-nav and I'm getting the instructions on where to go, to me, my 12 steps was like that. It kept me working a better program. If I'm honest on a daily basis, then there's no need for me to try and cover up who I am. Yeah. There's no need for me to fill that hole in the soul, because I'm being the best person I can be on a daily basis. And for me, you know, I got to like right my wrongs. And what I realized was by the time I'd gotten into AA, you know, I kind of hated the world. I hated God. I hated the world. I hated my parents. Look what yous have done to me. This is how I've ended up like this. And all of a sudden it's kind of, you know, people are saying, well, what's your part? And I'm going, my part? I haven't got a part. And then all of a sudden you start saying, well, really, you know, my children needed it, and yet I relied on them. So I started seeing the moral aspects of what addiction had done to us as well. And, you know, I believe the addictive part of me, the disease, and I do believe it can be that disease of addiction, you know, that thing that I need to change, and I just needed to feel better. I don't feel good enough today, I need something now. You know, that selfish aspect of like, but what do you need? You know, I hadn't been considerate. I hadn't been caring and kind. I had been me. Do you know how bad my life has been? And that's why I do what I do. And all of a sudden, that was changing. You know, I was becoming more selfless. I was becoming more kind and caring. I was becoming more considerate. And that I had never ever really known before.
Yeah, there's a few things you said in there that I can massively relate to. You know, it becomes selfless.
Yeah.
I think that's a saying that a lot of people use, but you still have to be a bit selfish, don't you, in recovery?
Yes. If I don't, so here's the thing, I got it wrong as well. We were just talking about this yesterday with Dion. When I first got well, you do want to save the world. And really, I got sober, and now I was saying to my children, right, so listen, we're going to have a bedtime, and I want you in at this time, and I want the homework done. And my kids were like, fuck off. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? You've never been a parent, and all of a sudden you're thrusting bedtimes on and homework and all that. And in my head, though, I'm living in fantasy again. In my head, I want to be like the Brady Bunch. I'm doing the right thing here. Why is the world not doing what I want? And it was the same with like sponsoring or helping people. And we start putting everybody else's needs first. I was like, look at me, look how I've turned around my life. But what I realised as well is that's very draining, that's very tiring, and I didn't have a lot of myself anyway. You know, I believe I've got to fill up on me.
Yeah.
And if I don't put me first, then I can't be the best mom I can be. I can't be the best sponsor I can be. I can't be the best person in the community. You know, so I have to put but I used to get that wrong, you know, when people were saying you have to put you first. And I was like, no, I've been really selfish all my life. I now need to be there for my children. But when my children ended up growing up and they had their own problems with addiction, my guilt made me constantly try and save them.
Yeah.
And that made it worse, didn't make it better. And it took us years and a lot of pain and a lot of alternative other ways of like sitting in meetings, talking about it, going, I can't save them and I want to save them. And really what I had to do was set boundaries and that and look after myself, because I thought I'm going to use again. I'm going to use and I'm going to use with them and I'm going to die. And actually that kind of happened after 15 years. And what happened was then I'm the one that's in the hospital and my kids were still doing their own thing. And I'm the one that's just trying to kill myself. So what I learned now is I can carry a message of recovery, but I can't carry the addict and I can't carry the person. And it's not my bloody job to fix other people. I can give you the tools, but if you going to use them tools, brilliant. And if you're not, that's on you, not me. What I also learned really quick is my children have a God and I'm not it. And that just was a weight off my shoulders, because the guilt in us, thought it was my job to save them, and it's not my job. I have to save me, and if I save me, then I can be a better example to my children, rather than me trying to save them or trying to orchestrate their life and run that narrative. And it's not, it's on them. They're never going to learn if they don't make their own mistakes as well. So I really learned that the hard way. It was really hard, it was really painful. And it got to, and it's a gamble. It really is a gamble as well. Right, okay, I'm not saving my children anymore. I love you. Yeah, but it's your fault. We're like this. I know, and I'm sorry, but there's nothing. The amount, if I had a fiver for every time I had said sorry to my children, I would be a millionaire, but I can't change my past either, unfortunately. And my children were really angry when I went, I love you so much, and I'm so sorry that I really ballsed up at the start of your life and I wasn't there for you and it was neglectful and I was emotionally unavailable, but I can't change it and I can't save you either. And when I pulled back from them, they were so angry they didn't talk to us. So it must have been a couple of years. And every day I went to bed, praying and scared. And over the Christmas and that, I remember I cried. There's so many tears that I shed, but there was nothing I could do either. And it's such a gamble thinking my kids might die. But I had to kind of take that risk, and thankfully for me, it paid off, because then one day I got a phone call and my daughter went, Mum, I'm in rehab, I'm in recovery and I want to make amends to you. And then Dion started getting well after that as well, you know what I mean? And I kind of realised that, we really can't save the addict. We can give them the tools, but whether they choose to use that or not is up to them.
Yeah. I think if we just go back to something you said in that, Karen, what I heard was because of the guilt and shame.
Yes.
That I was feeling, I wanted to people please.
Yep.
And save the world.
Yeah.
It's quite common though, isn't it?
Very.
What do you have to do to not people please and deal with the guilt and shame?
So the guilt and shame in the beginning, I had a sponsor and I just used to, because it's hard in the beginning, isn't it? In the beginning, it's really exciting because in the beginning, oh my God, I'm not drinking, I'm not using, I'm not gambling, I'm not this, I'm not that. It's great. However, at the same time, the good news is you get your feelings back. The bad news is you get your feelings back. And also you get memories back. And I started getting memories and they used to pop up like daisies. And I hated that. And I had a sponsor that says, where every day you're sober, you're making amendments. Every day you're sober. And I really recognize that, if I live another 40 years, that's another 40 years of putting right kind of what I'd done wrong. But what I also realized as well is I never ever woke up one day and went, one day I'm going to be the worst mom I possibly can. I'm going to be an alcoholic who takes copious amounts of men and medication to numb how I feel. Nobody ever wanted that for their life. So I had to really recognize that I never meant to hurt anybody. I just didn't know how to live in the world with me, and I used what I could to change the way I felt to make us feel better. I did the best I could with what I had, and really I owed it to myself to forgive myself to be a better person, because feelings are not facts. Feelings are not facts. And if I'm feeling really shitty on an occasion, it doesn't mean it's real. So I kind of had to be loving and kind to myself. I can't be loving and kind to anyone if I'm not loving and kind to myself. I kind of judge my worth these days. For me, I have a God, I really do have a faith. And for me, it's like I was such a people pleaser out of codependency that I was never going to be happy because my basis of how I felt about myself was on how other people felt about me. Whereas now I take my worth to God and go, God, am I being a good enough person in your eyes? Am I doing the right thing in your eyes? And when I do that, I care less about, not in a nasty way, less about what other people's opinion of me is and more about how I feel about myself. Because if I'm not looking after me, then I cannot look after you and I can't be a good example. I really cannot.
One of the big things that was said to me in my early recovery was somebody else's opinion of you, Richie, is nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
And that was massively helpful for me because I try to people please all the time, try to keep everybody happy, and it's tiring and draining and, and you only end up worse off for yourself. And that led us down the path of going, well, actually, you know what? I don't like everybody.
Yeah.
And that's all right. I don't have to like everybody. So why should everybody like me? And that's okay. And I still live by that now, and I'll always try and offer support and help if I can. But not everybody wants it offers.
Yeah.
And that's fine as well. And I don't take that personally because I truly believe there's so many ways to recover.
Yeah.
And if it's not the way that I offer or not the support that I offer, hopefully I can signpost you or direct you to somewhere else where you might get it. And I think, that they're the types of things I'm hearing from you, Karen, is once you put yourself first a little bit, you stop the people pleasing, you deal with the guilt and shame a little bit and accept it for what it is. I think that's a massive word, isn't it, in recovery? Acceptance.
Yep.
It's huge. And once we do that, we've got a chance.
Yeah.
We've got a chance. You mentioned in there as well, you got 15 years sober and then you lapsed. What went on there for you?
So in my 15 years, I've done really well. I've done a lot of media work and TV work and lots of hospitals and prisons and lots of things around FASD and done really good. I kind of didn't really think I needed the meetings anymore. And for me, and it's not for everyone, but for me, I kind of need to remember who I am. And all of a sudden, I started forgetting that, it was a bit of a bad problem. I started thinking, maybe I'm different now. Maybe I've had loads of counselling, I've had loads of therapy. What had happened for me really was, as well, I started getting resentful. I was getting really resentful of people again. And so I stayed away from meetings. But when I stayed away from meetings, I started feeling like I could be like the rest of my family again. And a lot of my family is still in addiction. And all of a sudden, I'm not with the healthy support around us. I'm back with people who's using or who's really dysfunctional. Yeah. And all of a sudden, I felt like the outsider again. And my parents died in a very short time. And my two children were also in really bad in their addiction at the time as well. And for me, it's like, I really believe the ism is incredibly short memory. The alcoholism or the ism of anything, it's kind of that incredibly short memory. And for me, I remember the adverts on the telly were coming on with pink gin. The first thing I thought of when I seen that was, why was that not invented when I was out there drinking? I would have loved that. It looks beautiful. It looks really glamorous. And it kind of stuck in my head. And with all the pain that was going on with my own children and then my parents dying and all I was also dating someone at the time who was cheating on as well. And all the pain was back on us. And I just thought, I had a lapse of the memory and I thought, if I could just have one, just one night, if I just have one night of turning the pain off and then I'll start again tomorrow. But unfortunately, when I have one of anything, I'm back in it. I'm in that madness, and that one night turned into like 10 months, which put us on a life support machine in the RVI. And that's when I came to. And it was just like 10 months of kind of carnage that I can't really remember, but I kind of lost everything, absolutely everything I lost in that 10 months.
Leading up to that, Karen, what were kind of some of the warning signs, do you think, or what were the kind of triggers that were happening in your life that you could have identified as being, leading down that path again, do you think?
I think I'm starting to believe my own head again. When you're bouncing it off somebody in dysfunction, like I was back hanging around with people that was in dysfunction and not in recovery, then they're not going to have my best interests at heart. So I'm starting to believe my own illusion again, my disillusion really. And I remember the first thing I noticed was when I was doing the school run for my younger children, I started losing my confidence. I started not being able to make eye contact with the mums. I started feeling less than again. I started feeling not as good as again. I started having secrets again. I started being resentful. I started being jealous. Why have they got what I worked really hard for and I never got that? I never got the promotion. I never got that house. I never got that car. I'm still driving like some little Almira or something, you know, or the Corsa. Why that? You know, the jealousy and the envy, and the grass is greener on the other side. And it's kind of all of that irritability, discontent, all of that was back.
Yeah, it's seeking that external validation again, isn't it? We've gone from within to external.
Yeah.
And it's not a nice place to be, is it?
No.
I think there's a few other things you mentioned there, Karen, where, you know, your confidence had been knocked again, your self-esteem had been knocked again. How do you get them back?
So for me, I always sought for people to give them. We're lazy, aren't we? I think humans are lazy, do you know? When I look back now, the reason I was always dating somebody is I wanted them to give it to us. And what I do now and say to the women that I help now is we have to give it to ourselves. Self-esteem is called self. If it was because of other people, it would be called other people's esteem. So the first thing we have to do is stop being lazy and stop trying to cut corners. We have to give it to ourselves. I can't, you know, when people are putting selfies all over the face, I used to do that. I don't do anything like that anymore. Or I was always chasing that outside validation. And now it's about giving it to myself and getting the acceptance as well. You know, like Karen, and it sounds awful at first. I said to sponsees or a lot of the women that I help, I'll say, put a picture of yourself on your phone. And they're like, I can't go out the house with that. And I'm like, you can. Put a picture of yourself on the phone and just say, do you know what? I'm good enough. Because at the minute I couldn't say, Karen, I love you. But I could say, okay, well then I'm good enough. Okay, yep, I am. I'm enough. It started off with I'm enough. And then it was, I'm good enough. And then actually it was, I love and approve of myself. I'm doing the best I can with what I've got on a daily basis. And that is all I can. So it was about giving it to myself instead of putting a selfie on and wanting somebody else to like give us likes. Because the thing that's based on that is if you don't get enough likes that day, then your self-worth's on the floor again, you know, and I couldn't afford to live like that. So it's about, no, self-esteem comes from self.
Yeah. The thing I love most about that is it was never just like, I've got no self-worth and I've got no self-esteem to I love myself.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? There were steps you had to take, wasn't there? And you had to challenge the thoughts that you were having, and you had to challenge the, you know, the probably quite deep-rooted feelings that you had about yourself.
Yeah.
But you had to challenge them step by step, slowly by slowly. But actually, once you had the self-awareness that that's what you had to do, you were able to start working on it.
Yeah.
And I say to people all the time, you've got to do the work.
Yeah.
So many people, like you say, want to come in and just be fixed.
Yeah.
Or they do a few meetings or they do a few months and they're like, yeah, I've got it, I'm fine, I'm okay, I'm off I go again. And you've got to continue to do the work, isn't you? And I think for me, the most important part of my journey was accepting that the journey never ends. You know, like there's big debates around, are you always in recovery? Are you recovered? Are you still an addict? All that sort of stuff. And I don't think there's a right or wrong. I think it's about however you frame that for yourself. Yeah. And I think that's the most important thing. Like recovery, whatever works for you, you know, at any given time. Because what worked for me at day 1 and day 10 and day 1,000 were all different, all very, very different. And that's okay that they change, and accept that actually they serve us for a purpose or a period of time. And then I'm allowed to move on and I'm allowed to go to the next thing. But it's step by step. And that's what I heard when you were talking there was, I'm enough.
Yeah.
I'm good enough. I love, you know.
I'm more than enough.
I'm more than enough. I love myself. Mm-hmm. Like, they're all steps on. And I think that's like a beautiful way of showing people that just take the next step. Whatever the next step is, that's what we need to try and get to. Rather than going, there's Karen, 5 years, you know, abstinent, 20 years in recovery. She's achieved all this stuff. I want to be like Karen on day 1. It's not happening, is it? And I think that's what I I always try and encourage people to try and find somebody who's a few months ahead of you, you know, and attach yourself to them a little bit and watch what they do, and, you know, and see if they've got good recovery, and then work out what's going to work for you as well. Yeah. What else has come along in recovery for you, Karen? What opportunities have come, and what's some of the highlight? What's the highlight reel of your recovery, Karen?
Oh, I have so many. I honestly have so many. You know, I came into recovery and I thought I just had a drink problem, and then I realised I was a problem, and I've addressed everything. You know, when I look back now in hindsight, I came in as a self-harmer, relying on other people to give us, you know, that the men. I don't need men anymore. I don't need medication anymore. I don't need to abuse anything. I don't need other people's validation. I don't need to drink. I don't need to drug. I don't need to gamble. I don't need to do any of that. I give it to myself. But also, you know, I'm now a mom as well. I'm a mother, and I set up support groups. I help a lot of women. I've overcome domestic abuse. I've overcome all the trauma of my past. One of the steps of that I'll just briefly mention, because I think it's so important. I always think we're senses as well, you know, when we're caught in trauma or we're triggered and we're frightened, because there's a lot of people that has got trauma as well, as, you know, just touching base with that and using like with senses, like smell. I always think get a safe smell. And when you're triggered or you're traumatized or you're having a really bad day or you want to use or you want to relapse, get your favorite smell, whether that be lavender or lemongrass or a perfume or a candle or something. Put it in the bath, just slow everything down, breathe it in, and it's like, it's going to be okay. All you have to do is keep it in the day. And if you look at the clock, you know, and realize that you've just got to make it to 12 o'clock of the night, and that's another day. And to me as well, because it always passes, doesn't it? You know, the amount of people that will relapse or unfortunately go and hurt themselves or self-harm and that, and really it would have passed. And it's about that. I'm going to Parliament next week. Who would have thought that? You know, I couldn't string a sentence together when I first come into recovery. And now they ask us to do things like that. I'm always being interviewed. And I just get to help and meet some like amazing people. And I think like all of those are the gifts, the gifts that I could never have imagined, the opportunities that come my way. You know, I had a book published. I'm helping Balance roll out their blueprint about the harms, especially in Newcastle, and the harms of alcohol. And we have the highest rates of death in England, the North East does, you know, so people come to me. that blows my mind, you know what I mean? People come to me for help and advice, and I think like, wow, how did that happen? But I'm really comfortable in my own skin. I don't squirm when I wake up in the morning. You know, I woke up this morning and again, it's another beautiful day. And it's like, oh my God, I love the colours of autumn. I love the blue sky and the reds and the greens. And it's like, wow, things that I never ever noticed before I noticed today. Squirrel, if I see a squirrel, I'm out with the phone. And it's like, look, you know, just like life. I love life.
Simple things, isn't it?
Simple things. Absolutely love it.
Something you touched on there. Well, two things you said there. I couldn't string a sentence together. Yep. And then I published a book.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
They're a bit opposite ends of the scale, aren't they? Tell us a little bit about the book.
So the book, when I came out my relapse, I wanted to write about what led up to the relapse, what had happened in my life. I kind of wanted to expose all of that stuff, and I never had a voice, so it's very important that I have a voice today. And I wrote the book, and the book is called My Journey Through Hell, interestingly enough, to find my true worth. And I believe that's what happened as well. You know, I didn't know who I was, and I know exactly who I am today. So the book was about how I got there. But I'm writing a second book as well, and I love that. I love how difficult we can make it, but really it's easy, isn't it? If we keep it simple.
Yeah.
You know, but we can overcomplicate it, and we don't need to. If we just keep doing the next right thing, if we just keep it in the day, and for me, I'm glad recovery is going to be for the rest of my life, because I want to keep improving. I want to be a better version than me. You know, the beginning of my 20s, I was so dysfunctional, I was off the scale. You know, my life was a car crash. And when I think now I'm a productive member of society, and that's because of recovery, that blows my mind. So it's about that. I want to keep recovering. I want to keep recovering.
So given where you are in your journey now, what's 3 to 5 things in your toolkit that really massively help keep you in recovery, in the right frame of mind, doing the right things?
So I believe if I keep my conscience good and clear, that because when I'm doing the wrong things, I can't live with how it makes us feel. It makes us feel really uncomfortable. And at some point I will want to use. I can't afford to be resentful. Anger is a luxury that I cannot afford. I cannot afford to be really angry. I was very explosive with anger. So I can't, those are luxuries that I could have in the past, but I cannot have in recovery because they make us feel like a bad person. When I feel like a bad person, I will act and react like a bad person. And keeping it in the day, keeping it in the day. Remember, in the hungry, angry, lonely, tired. If I'm too hungry, I'm not going to be focused. I'm not going to be thinking right. If I'm too tired, if I'm lonely, reach out to somebody. Just doing the right thing, keeping it in the day, being the best version of me on a daily basis, and remembering that it's not the end of the world. I could catastrophize everything, and that's just me, because I can still go into fantasy, and it's that fantasy part of me, and it's about keeping it real. If I keep it real, it's okay, it's okay. Karen, it's okay. It's not the end of the world, And when women get in touch with us, they'll say something and I'll say, recall your last use and how that made you feel. And then remember how you feel today. And it always puts it in perspective for me. Because when I remember my last using, I came to on a life support machine in the RVI, strapped up with all machines, having lost everything. And then no matter what's going wrong in my day to day, when I think back of my last using, that really was the end of the world. And what I've got today, it trivializes it. So kind of forward fast the what I think might be, we'll just have one, never was. It led to the RVI. And if I remember it like that, then it always puts my life in perspective and go, oh, actually, yeah, I feel really good. Look what I've achieved. So it's about that.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, isn't it? I call that building the evidence.
Yeah.
So build the evidence constantly all the time that actually I am doing all right, because if you're out like me, Karen, there's the twat Richie's not far behind us, and he'll want to come and remind us that I can still be a twat, and that's the thing about me is I need to build the evidence that I'm not. So I try and do that on a daily basis, so build the evidence and, keep stacking it up. And when you're having a shit day, go back and read it.
Yeah.
Go back and have a look and see how far you've come. And like you said there, you always remember that day in the RVI is the thing that you never want to go back to. So it keeps you moving forward in the right direction and just makes you grateful, doesn't it, for where you are now.
And recognising, Richie, that sometimes the critical voice is not even my voice. It might have been a parent's voice, or it might have been somebody else's voice. It's not real. I always judged everything on how I felt, but feelings are not facts. It's just how I feel in that moment. So that critical voice, telling it to sod off as well, and then replay. Do you know what I do as well? I visualize 2 buttons, and one of them's negative and one of them's positive. And when I catch myself and I'm really telling myself off, I realize that I've hit that self-harm button. It's somewhere along the line, and now I need to hit the positive button. When I hit the positive button, it's bright red, and it's kind of I love you, Karen button. And I visualize it, and I press that button, and it's going, do you know what? Yep, no, I am good enough.
And that's so important, isn't it? It's that self-awareness to just recognize that this isn't serving me. How do I change it?
Yep.
And I think we can all recognize when something isn't serving us, but we struggle to then do the self-love, the self-compassion part. And I think that's the important part, isn't it? Is that we can challenge that belief and we can create our own voice.
I think self-harm as well, though, is addictive. I think people get caught up in a shame hit and hurting themselves as well. And when you realise that that's just habitual as well, and we can change that, rather than we don't have to be constantly hurting ourselves. I think there's a fear of who we were going to be if we're really strong and positive and successful. Oh my God, I don't really deserve that. But really we do. So it's about changing that entirely. I don't need to self-harm. If I say to somebody as well, like, use the word of, look, that you're self-harming yourself, and they give that a new title, they're less likely to want to do it. They can catch themselves a bit more going, oh yeah, I've just slipped into self-sabotage there. I've just slipped into self-harm there, and then change it. And the opposite of that, it's always about doing the opposite, isn't it? The opposite of self-harm is self-soothing, self-love, self-acceptance, self-compassion.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. All them things are so, so important, I think, Karen. And for me, it is that, isn't it? It's about, how do we change the story?
Yeah.
How do you change the story? How do we catch the story? And then how do we change the story? And obviously it is doing the opposite of whatever the negative story is that we have. But what's next for Karen?
Oh, well, I definitely want to do a second book. I want to do that. Do you know, I have opportunities come all my way, and I just like to see where God's going to take us. I really do. I just think, last week I was on the radio and then on the TV, and I think there's just more to do. It's all around recovery, though. I love seeing, I really do love it. I'm incredibly passionate about seeing someone who's hated themselves most of their life, and now they're starting to get self-love, self-acceptance. They're building a brand, they're building a job, they're building a family. That rippling effect that we have on our own families and then on the community that we live in. So anything that contributes to that, I want to be part of.
Great stuff. I love it. Karen, it's been great to talk to you. Thank you for everything you do. And yeah, good luck with what's to come.
Thank you. Thanks, Richie. Thanks very much for having us.
Thanks for listening to the Recovery Toolkit podcast. If you took something positive from it, then why not subscribe? If you or somebody you know has been suffering gambling-related harm, why not head over to our website where you can join our community? The link is in the show notes.